Single black father aids an elderly lady during his delivery route unaware she's a secret millionaire. The old woman's house smelled like forgotten years, but something about her eyes made Marcus pause. He had deliveries to finish, a daughter to pick up, but instead, he crossed the threshold and, unknowingly, into a life-changing secret. Marcus Thompson had always known hard days, but Tuesday felt like it was pushing the edge. The sky had opened up that morning with a July storm so fierce it turned sidewalks into rivers, soaking him through as he loaded his beat-up Dodge Caravan with cardboard boxes stained from warehouse leaks. He wiped his hands on his jeans and adjusted the bandage on his knuckle from yesterday's mishap his tint scraped this week. He was 38, a single father of a sharp-witted 11-year-old named Layla, and his second job delivering specialty meals for a local organic grocery chain was barely keeping the lights on. But the tips were decent if he smiled enough and took the extra steps others skipped. And that's what led him to House 212 on Vine Street. It was the third delivery of the morning, a last-minute addition squeezed in by dispatch. No one ever wanted that one. Old place. No tip history. Porch looked like it hadn't seen a broom since Clinton was president. But something made him slow down when he reached the door. The house was draped in ivy, windows clouded over like cataracts. The screen door hung off one hinge. It looked abandoned. Marcus double-checked the address. Yeah, 212. Eliza M., the order said. Organic beet soup and gluten-free cornbread. Seemed specific. He knocked. No answer. He was turning to leave when he heard it. A soft scraping. Then a voice, thin as paper, called out, "Wait, please." He turned. The door creaked open, and there she was. Eliza Mayfield, 87, barefoot, dressed in a nightgown so thin you could see the outline of her shoulders. Her gray hair was pulled back in a shaky braid. She looked up at him with eyes like faded ink used to be sharp, now struggling to remember. "I didn't expect it to come so soon," she murmured, glancing down at the bag in his hands. "It's all right, ma'am," Marcus said gently. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just slow. Bones don't move like they used to." He stepped forward. "Can I help bring it in?" She hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. "If you would." Marcus stepped inside. The air was heavy, musty, thick with old books and something like lavender. The living room was a time capsule. Furniture from the 60s, doilies on every surface, photos yellowed in frames. A fireplace sat unused beneath a crooked painting of a ship at sea. The carpet had balled up in the corners like it had given up years ago. He placed the bag on the kitchen counter, cleared of everything but a single china plate and a half-finished crossword. "You live here alone?" he asked before realizing it might be too personal. Eliza smiled faintly. "Been that way a long time." Marcus lingered, unsure why. Maybe it was the way her hand trembled as she reached for the cornbread. Maybe it was the loneliness in the room. It was louder than the thunder outside. "Do you need help with anything else?" She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "Do you know how to change light bulbs?" He did. And so he stayed another 20 minutes, changing 2 bulbs and resetting her stovetop clock. She insisted on paying him with a crumpled $5 bill and a single tea biscuit wrapped in wax paper. When he got back in the van, Marcus sat for a minute, staring at the storm-choked street. He wasn't sure why his throat felt tight. 2 days later, he was back. Another delivery, this one deliberate. He'd taken the shift hoping her name would show again. It did. This time, she was waiting by the door. "I remembered your name," she said with a tiny smile. "Marcus." He smiled back. "Glad you did. You remind me of someone. My son. He passed a long time ago." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he helped her again. This time, it was moving a stack of old books from the living room to a shelf she couldn't reach anymore. She offered him lemon water and asked about his daughter. When he showed her a photo of Layla, something in her expression softened. "Smart eyes," she said. "Like yours." He felt something then. A connection he couldn't explain. It wasn't romantic or even familial, it was human. Raw. Unspoken. The deliveries kept coming. Weekly at first, then twice a week. Each time, Eliza had a little more life in her voice. She'd wait by the window now, sometimes even dressed. The house began to change. Dust vanished. Curtains opened. One day she wore earrings. Marcus never asked how she could afford the pricey specialty meals. He figured maybe her pension stretched farther than most. Then one evening, as he was leaving, she pressed something into his hand. A letter. Handwritten. Delicate ink. He glanced at it, confused. Read it later, she said. Not now? When it's time. He tucked it into his glove box and didn't think much of it. Life kept moving. Layla got sick, bills stacked up, and Eliza's deliveries stopped for 2 weeks. When he returned, the house was quiet. Too quiet. He found her in the armchair by the fireplace, asleep. Except she wasn't. She'd passed sometime that morning, the TV playing static in the background. There were no relatives listed on her file. No emergency contact. Just Marcus's name, handwritten on a sticky note stuck to the fridge. He sat in that living room for hours, listening to the silence. The next day, the letter burned in his hands as he opened it. The paper trembled as he read. Inside was the truth. A confession, and an inheritance that would shake his world to its core. The handwriting was delicate, looping in old-fashioned cursive, like it belonged in a different century. Marcus read the letter once. Then again. By the third time, his hands were shaking. Dear Marcus, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I've never believed in fate, but I do believe people come into your life at the exact moment you need them most. That's what you were for me. And, I hope, maybe I was something for you too. You didn't just bring me food. You brought me back to life. There's something I never told anyone. I was married once. He was a quiet man, but brilliant. We bought stocks when they were worth pennies. We never touched the money. Just let it sit, year after year. And then, he died. I never remarried. I lived simply. I didn't need anything more. But now I think I know what I want to do with what's left. I've arranged everything. My lawyer has your name. I've left it to you and your daughter. All of it. You gave me something money could never buy. Let me do the same for you. With love, Eliza Mayfield. Marcus sat there for a long time, staring at the paper as if it might change its meaning. It didn't. When he called the number listed at the bottom, her attorney's office, it didn't take long to confirm it. Eliza had, in fact, left everything to Marcus Thompson and his daughter Layla. The estate, the house, and nearly $3 million in stocks and bonds. It didn't feel real at first. Marcus had never even seen that many zeros in one place. His checking account barely stayed above water, and now he was technically a millionaire? He didn't tell Layla right away. She was still reeling from Eliza's death too, though she'd only met her once on a quick delivery ride along. But that one time, Eliza had given Layla an old music box and called her a girl with sunlight in her bones. When he did finally sit Layla down and tell her everything, she didn't believe him at first either. She left it to us? Why? Marcus had to think carefully. Because sometimes, baby, kindness circles back. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and lawyers. Eliza hadn't been exaggerating. Everything was set up, neat and precise. Marcus met her financial advisor, an older man with bushy eyebrows and a voice like gravel, who confirmed it all. She'd been planning this for the last year, he said, but never told anyone. Said she'd found someone worth giving it to. Someone honest. Said your daughter reminded her of herself. Marcus tried to process that. Tried to understand the why. Why him? Why not a relative? But Eliza had made one thing clear. She had no family left, not really. And even if she did, she'd already chosen Marcus. He didn't quit his job right away. Something about continuing his delivery route grounded him. The feel of the steering wheel. The smell of cardboard. It reminded him of the life he'd built with his own hands. But he did go back to the house. Often. At first, just to check on things. Then, out of something deeper. One afternoon, as the autumn leaves began to fall in soft waves across Vine Street, Marcus stood in Eliza's overgrown garden and felt a strange pull. This place had history. Not just hers. Now his too. Layla loved the house. She ran through its halls like it had always been hers. They didn't move in right away. They still lived in their tiny rented apartment across town, but every weekend they came to clean, to restore, to remember. They found things. Old letters, photographs, receipts for donations Eliza had made anonymously to schools and shelters. She was already giving, Marcus said one day, running his hand along the dusty piano in the parlor. Layla nodded. She just gave the last part to us. One rainy Thursday, Marcus visited the lawyer again. He had questions. About how to handle the money. About how to make it mean something. I don't want this to just disappear, he said. I wanted to help people. Like she helped us. The lawyer smiled. I think she'd like that. They worked out a trust. Some for Layla's college fund. Some invested carefully. But the rest Marcus decided would go toward a new idea. The Mayfield Project, a small community center named after Eliza for seniors who had no one. A place with hot meals, books, light bulbs that always got changed. The things Eliza never asked for, but always needed. It took months of planning, permits, city approvals, fundraising. But the story spread. Single black father inherits fortune from elderly woman he helped. It made the news. Local at first, then national. People reached out, offered donations, volunteers, supplies. The building went up on the edge of the old neighborhood, near where Eliza had lived for 60 years. Marcus stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, holding Layla's hand, blinking back tears. "I didn't know kindness could echo this loud," he whispered. But the story wasn't over yet. One night, Marcus found another letter. This one tucked behind a panel in Eliza's bedroom closet. Faded, brittle, but intact. Dated decades ago. It was addressed to a name Marcus didn't recognize, Charlotte Mayfield. A sister, or maybe a daughter. The letter was unfinished. Half a sentence dangling in the middle of a thought. "I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. I never stopped looking. If you ever find this." That was it. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing. She did have family. Maybe. What had happened? Who was Charlotte? Where was she now? The discovery stirred something in Marcus. A need to understand the full story. To finish what Eliza had started. He spent the next few weeks between delivery routes and community center meetings digging into old records. The lawyer helped. So did an old librarian who remembered Eliza as the quiet girl with eyes too sad for someone that young. They found traces. A birth certificate. An old school photo. A foster care file from 1965. And Fina dead end. Until Marcus received a call from a woman in Boston. "My name is Julia Hart," she said. "I think my grandmother was Charlotte Mayfield." Marcus flew to Boston a week later, using the last of the travel vouchers someone had donated after the news story went viral. Julia met him at a coffee shop just off Harvard Square. She had her grandmother's eyes. "Charlotte passed in '09, she said softly. "But she always talked about a sister named Eliza. Said she was taken from her when they were young. They were supposed to be adopted together, but got separated. She never saw her again." Marcus felt his chest ache. Eliza never stopped looking. Julia took out a worn photograph. Two girls, maybe 6 and 7, holding hands in a patch of summer light. She kept this by her bedside every day until she died. They sat in silence for a while, two strangers connected by the ghosts of a lost childhood. "I think she would have loved to know," Julia whispered. Marcus returned to Vine Street with a copy of the photo. He placed it in the center of the mantel, next to Eliza's music box. "She found her way back," he said. Layla stood beside him, holding his hand. "I think you both did," she whispered. The house remained. Marcus didn't sell it. Couldn't. It became a place of memory, of meaning. Sometimes he still went there alone. Sat in Eliza's chair. Watched the light shift across the faded wallpaper. And sometimes, he'd swear he heard her voice. Kindness circles back. He believed it now. Not just because of the money. Because of the way it changed him. Because of the way he chose to change others. Because somewhere, in the quiet spaces between what's lost and what's found, he'd learned that love doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes, it arrives in a delivery bag, in a dusty music box, in a letter written with trembling hands. And sometimes, it leaves behind a legacy greater than gold. Winter came early that year. Boston's chill still clung to Marcus when he returned home, but something inside him had shifted, settled. Maybe. The story had found its lost ending. Charlotte hadn't been forgotten. And neither had Eliza. The community center, the Mayfield Project, had its grand opening just a few weeks later. By then, the walls were painted bright with murals of neighborhood elders, kids, and trees with twisting roots. Marcus stood at the back, watching Layla show one of the seniors how to use a tablet. "Just tap here," she said gently, "like you're pressing a button on the microwave." The old woman laughed. "Lord, I barely know how to use the microwave." The place was alive, buzzing. Seniors who had once sat alone in apartments now played dominoes, learned to email their grandkids, or took yoga classes taught by a retired ballerina named Mrs. O'Brien. There was warmth here, intention, just like Eliza had given him. Marcus walked through the center slowly, taking it all in. The sunlight through the tall windows. The hum of laughter and low conversation. The smell of cornbread from the small cafe in the back. He thought of her then. Eliza. and how none of this would exist without one old woman, one kind gesture, and a delivery bag full of beet soup. But success came with its own problems. By spring, demand for the center had exploded. They had over 100 seniors coming weekly and a waiting list growing by the day. Marcus spent late nights poring over expansion plans and budgets. That's when the first donor backed out. A local business, one of their early supporters, decided to pull funding after a boardroom change. Then a second promised donation was delayed. Marcus could feel the ground shifting beneath him. The center was thriving, yes, but only if they kept meeting operational costs. He refused to panic. Instead, he reached out to a friend he hadn't seen since high school, Jamal, now working as a community development advisor for the city. Over coffee, Jamal shook his head. "You've done something real here, Marcus. Something sustainable. But you can't run it on hope. You need infrastructure, grants, political allies." Marcus hated the sound of all that. Politics, schmoozing, the game of it. He hadn't built this place to play games. He built it because people were hungry. Because loneliness was a kind of slow death. "I'll help you," Jamal said. "But you've got to be ready to fight for this." By summer, Marcus was speaking at city council meetings. At first, he stammered through every speech. Public speaking wasn't his thing. But Layla always sat in the front row, and every time he looked at her, he found his footing. He talked about Eliza, about the forgotten, about how sometimes the richest people lived in the smallest spaces. His words caught fire. The local news picked it up again. Then state media. More donors came. Some small, some surprisingly large. One woman gave in memory of her father who died alone in a nursing home. By the end of June, Marcus had secured enough funding not just to sustain the center but to expand it. A second location, in the south side. He visited the lot himself, walked the overgrown gravel where a laundromat used to stand. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine the future. Sunlight, open doors, chairs with wheels that didn't stick. He could hear Eliza's voice in his memory. "Start small. Be kind. Let it grow." At home, things were changing too. Marcus had finally moved Layla into the Vine Street house full-time. It had taken months to make it feel like there's painting over the old wallpaper, fixing the pipes, even adding a garden in the back. Layla planted lavender first. "So it always smells like her," she said. Then sunflowers. Then mint. Their weekends were slower now. Quieter. They ate on the porch, watched clouds, told stories about nothing. But sometimes, after Layla went to bed, Marcus would sit out back with a glass of tea and wonder what now? He had money. He had purpose. But what scared him most was how rare it all felt. How close he'd come to never having any of it. One night, Layla came downstairs crying. "A nightmare," she said. Marcus held her in his lap, the way he had when she was 6. "Tell me," he whispered. "I dreamed you left," she sobbed. "You were gone. And I was just here." He kissed her hair. "I'm not going anywhere, Lay." "But people do," she said. "Like Mama. And Miss Eliza." He didn't have an answer for that. Not a good one. So he just held her until she fell asleep again. And even after, he sat there, staring out the window, remembering the early mornings when he'd race deliveries, praying his van wouldn't die before he picked her up from school. Remembering the days he scraped together enough for groceries by returning soda cans. So much had changed. But he was still him. In August, the second center opened. It was smaller, rougher around the edges, but full of light. They named it Eliza's house and painted her name in bold letters across the brick. People came from miles around. Seniors, volunteers, students. And this time, it wasn't just Marcus doing it all. He had a staff now, a board, a mission statement. Still, he delivered the first meals himself. Beet soup and gluten-free cornbread. Just like before. It was sometime in October when a woman knocked on his door. She was maybe in her 50s, sharp features, tired eyes. She held a notebook in her hand and a business card that read Marla Green, documentary producer. "I've been following your story," she said. "I think it deserves to be told." Marcus hesitated. Told how? A short film, maybe longer. About the centers. About Eliza. About how one act of kindness turned into something this big. He wasn't sure. Part of him wanted to say no. The rest of him knew it wasn't his story anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been left behind and finally seen. So he said yes. The documentary came out the following spring. The Gift of Eliza premiered at a local film festival and was picked up by a major streaming platform a month later. Viewers across the country watched as Marcus pushed open Eliza's front door that first rainy morning. They cried when they saw Layla planting lavender. They smiled as Eliza's house opened its second wing. And suddenly, letters began pouring in. Hundreds. People sharing their own stories of kindness. Seniors writing to say they no longer felt invisible. Teachers, social workers, delivery drivers, people who had once felt like background noise now inspired to believe in their own worth. One letter stood out. It was from a woman in Detroit. Her name was Bernice. 81. She wrote, "I saw your story, and I wept. My son died 10 years ago. I've been alone ever since. But now I want to help. I've been saving. It's not much, but I want to build something here. Something like Eliza's house. Will you help me?" Marcus called her the next day. And that was how the third center began. By now, people were calling him a philanthropist, a founder, even a hero. But Marcus still didn't see himself that way. He still drove the van sometimes, still made deliveries when the mood struck, still walked through the old Vine Street house late at night, touching the doorframe Eliza once leaned on. Layla was 13 now, taller, smarter, a fire in her voice. "You should write a book," she told him once. He laughed. "I wouldn't know where to start." "At the beginning," she said, "when you knocked on her door." He looked at her, so much her mother's strength in her bones, and smiled. "Yeah, maybe that's the place." One rainy evening, nearly 2 years after Eliza died, Marcus returned to her grave. It was small, simple, her name etched gently into the stone. A small bench sat nearby. He sat there for a long time. No words, just silence. And then he finally spoke. "I found her, Eliza. Charlotte, you were right to keep looking." The wind answered in a hush. "And the centers they're growing. You started something you didn't live to see. But I carry it. Every day." A drop of rain slid down his cheek, indistinguishable from tears. "I still think about that first delivery. How I almost walked away." He looked up at the sky. "Thank you for calling me back." He stayed at the grave until the rain stopped. When he finally stood, the sun had dipped beneath the trees, casting long shadows over the cemetery. As he turned to leave, he noticed a small piece of paper tucked beneath one of the flowers by the headstone. It wasn't there earlier. He bent down and picked it up. The paper was folded into a perfect square, water-stained but still legible. On the front, written in neat cursive, it said, "To the one who stayed." Inside, a single line. "Your kindness planted a tree that will outlive all of us." No name, no address. But Marcus didn't need one. Somehow, he knew it had come from Charlotte. He pressed the note to his chest and smiled. 3 months later, Marcus found himself in Detroit. He stood beside Bernice as she walked the empty warehouse that would soon become the third senior center. Her steps were slow, her breath labored, but her eyes sparkled with something fierce. "Do you smell that?" she asked. Marcus inhaled. "Dust." "No, baby," she chuckled. "Possibility." He grinned. "That's one way to put it." Together, they outlined rooms, imagined walls, kitchens, gardens. Bernice wanted a rooftop greenhouse. "Seniors deserve beauty," she said. "Not just bingo." When the city hesitated to approve permits, Marcus showed up to meetings with his daughter and a stack of thank you letters from Boston elders. "This isn't a brand," he told them. "It's a movement." Detroit relented. Construction began the following week. Back in Boston, Layla was thriving. She had started writing essays, deep, vulnerable ones about growing up without her mother, and how watching her father rebuild their world had taught her that love was an action, not a feeling. One piece, titled "The Day My Dad Knocked on a Door That Changed Everything," was published in a national magazine. Marcus cried when he read it. He rarely cried anymore. But that night, he sat on the back porch, holding the printed copy to his chest, and let the tears fall like something sacred. He wasn't used to seeing himself through someone else's eyes. Especially not like that. Oprah called. No warning. No build-up. Just a voicemail one afternoon. "Hi Marcus, this is Oprah Winfrey. I've read about your work and would love to speak with you about your journey and Eliza's legacy. When you have time, please give me a call back." He played the message twice, just to make sure it was real. Then he called her, and everything changed again. They flew him and Layla to Chicago. The interview aired live. Millions watched. Marcus didn't try to be polished. He spoke the way he always had, straight, honest, no fluff. He talked about his daughter, about being a single father, about kindness as resistance. Oprah leaned forward at one point and asked, "When did you realize your life had changed?" Marcus thought for a long time before answering. It wasn't the funding or the news stories. It was the day Layla came to me and said, "Dad, I feel safe now." That's when I knew. Silence swept the studio. Then applause. After the show, messages flooded in again. One from a retired architect in Seattle offering to design a fourth center pro bono. Another from a chef in Atlanta who'd been inspired to start a mobile meal truck for seniors. A group of high schoolers in Tulsa even created a digital archive of elder stories, calling it the Eliza Project. Marcus didn't try to keep up with it all. He just smiled. Let it ripple. The tree Eliza had planted was growing roots deeper than he'd ever imagined. That winter, Marcus returned to the delivery route. Just for one day. He wanted to remember. The weather was brutal, ice on every step, snow swirling like flour, but he bundled up and made his way through the streets, hands chilled, breath fogging with every exhale. At one stop, an elderly man opened the door with wide eyes. "Wait, you're him, aren't you? From the news." Marcus laughed. "I'm just the delivery guy today." The man pulled him into a hug. "Well, bless you anyway. You gave us back our dignity." Marcus blinked. "What do you mean?" The man's voice cracked. "You made people see us again." That night, Marcus dreamed of Eliza. She was sitting in her chair, the one by the window, holding a cup of tea. "Marcus," she said softly, "do you remember what I told you about invisible people?" He nodded. "You said they were everywhere, that we passed them without knowing." She smiled. "Not anymore." Then she stood, came close, and whispered, "You're no longer just delivering meals. You're delivering hope." When he woke, the sky was pink with dawn, and his heart felt full. Spring returned. Boston bloomed early that year, as if the city itself had waited long enough to stretch into something new. The Eliza Foundation had just announced its fifth center in New Orleans this time, thanks to a hurricane-displaced grandmother who saw Marcus's story online and declared, "We've got elders down here too, and they ain't invisible." Marcus stood before a crowd at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The mayor spoke. Journalists gathered. There was a brass band playing When the Saints Go Marching In. But when it came time for him to speak, Marcus stepped up to the podium and simply said, "I was just trying to keep my daughter warm. And I met a woman who reminded me what warmth really is." And that was enough. In Boston, Layla was growing up fast. Too fast. She was 15 now. Talked about college. About maybe becoming a social worker. Or a writer. Or maybe both. Marcus watched her with awe. This girl who had once clung to his hand during thunderstorms, now teaching creative writing workshops to seniors every Saturday. One night, she handed him a journal. "What's this?" he asked. "It's Eliza's house," she said. "But on paper." He opened it slowly. Inside were stories. Dozens of them. Transcribed interviews with seniors across every center they'd built. Names, childhood memories, family recipes, letters to the past. Moments of heartbreak, joy, loss, love. Layla looked at him and said, "I want to publish it. Call it The Things We Almost Forgot." Marcus couldn't speak, just pulled her into his arms and held her tight. One morning, while organizing some of Eliza's old boxes for an exhibit, Marcus found something he hadn't seen before. It was a key, wrapped in velvet, tied with a note. "For when you're ready to open one more door." No address, no explanation. He almost set it aside, but something tugged at him. Later that week, he took the key to a locksmith friend, Mr. Rubin, a quiet man with thick glasses and a love for puzzles. After examining the teeth of the key, Mr. Rubin said, "This is old. Like, real old. Belongs to a safety deposit box. Not many of these left." It took 3 days, several phone calls, and a surprisingly helpful bank clerk named Diane before Marcus stood in a quiet bank vault downtown, facing box 721. He inserted the key, turned, and opened the door. Inside, a single black binder. On the front, in gold lettering, Legacy Ledger. Marcus opened it. His breath caught. It wasn't money. Not exactly. It was a blueprint. Detailed plans. Handwritten notes. Financial models. Community partnership ideas. Outreach templates. Legal footnotes. Even curriculum drafts for an educational wing. Eliza had been planning this for years. Decades, maybe. At the back of the binder, folded neatly, was a letter addressed to Marcus and Layla. "If you're reading this, it means you've already done the hardest part. You showed up. That's more than most ever do. This blueprint isn't about buildings. It's about people, about presence, about choosing to see the forgotten. Use it, change it, rewrite it. Just promise me you'll never let kindness become paperwork. Love, Eliza Mayfield. That night, Marcus spread the binder across the dining table. Layla sat beside him, flipping pages, her eyes wide. She built this, she whispered, before we ever knew her. He nodded. She built it for us, for whoever was willing to carry it. They stayed up until 3 a.m., dreaming aloud. What if the centers became hubs for intergenerational mentorship? What if young people could earn college credit for working with elders? What if communities started honoring stories as much as statistics? It was a new beginning, and neither of them was afraid. Years passed. The world changed again and again. Pandemics, elections, recessions, recoveries. But the Eliza Centers stood. They grew into 13 locations, then 21, each one unique, rooted in local stories, supported by both elders and youth. Marcus never chased expansion. He let it happen naturally, the way Eliza would have wanted. And each time a new door opened in a new city, he made sure to deliver the first meal himself. Still beet soup, still cornbread, still with that same quiet knock that had changed everything. Layla published her book. The Things We Almost Forgot hit bestseller lists within a week. She donated every cent to the foundation. She went on to study social work and public policy, eventually becoming a senior advisor for the National Council on Aging. But she always called her father every Sunday. Always asked him, "What are you reading this week, Dad?" And he always answered, "One of Eliza's." Because by then, every senior center had its own library, a growing collection of written stories, passed on like seeds. On the 20th anniversary of Eliza's passing, Marcus returned once more to her grave. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Layla, now 32, with her own daughter named Eliza, of course cradled in her arms. The child reached out toward the headstone, babbling softly. Marcus knelt beside her, touched the earth gently, and whispered, "You're still here." He didn't need to say more. Layla placed a single sunflower at the base of the stone. Her daughter clapped, delighted by the yellow burst. Then they stood in silence, 3 generations shaped by one woman's love. Later that day, Marcus spoke at a private ceremony for the foundation's donors, volunteers, and elders. He stood in the center's main hall now called the Mayfield Forum, where portraits of seniors lined the walls like stained glass. He looked out at the crowd, some familiar, some brand new. And then, without notes, he began. "When I was young, I thought survival was the goal. Make it through the day, keep your kid fed, pay the rent. That was enough. Until one woman reminded me that survival is just the beginning." He paused. Living truly living means leaving behind more than footsteps. It means planting trees you'll never sit under. He gestured to the audience. "You are the orchard." And with that, he stepped back, tears in his eyes, and let the applause wash over him like sunrise. Later that evening, when all the guests had gone and the halls were quiet, Marcus wandered through the center alone. He stopped by the front door, the same kind of door Eliza once opened. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the original delivery manifest from that very first day, the one with Eliza's name and address scribbled in blue ink. He pinned it to the bulletin board by the entrance. Next to it, he wrote a single sentence. One meal, one knock, one life forever changed. Then he turned out the lights and went home. The end.